This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's Tuesday today, which means we're doing a top 5 list, and today is, I guess, the big one, because it's a topic I've never really talked about before. It's basically the bands and artists that got me into music in the first place, right from when I was like that tall. I've talked in the past about my favourite blues artists and favourite rock albums and my favourite guitar tones and favourite live albums, but I've never really kind of cast the net as broad as this and spoken about the artists and bands who made my little ears when I was a wee whippersnapper prick up and take notice and think, I'm interested in this thing called music. Let's investigate it further. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the first one on the list.
The Shadows.
You know, I've tried to address these in roughly chronological order as they happen to me. And I have spoken about this particular incident before when I kind of got turned onto the Shadows, but in other contexts, really. Excuse me. Essentially, when I was really young, like preschool, a toddler, there was a freak weather event in this part of the world where the sky went as black as night in the middle of the day, one sunny summer's day. Of course, all the pollution from the heavy industry in the air around here didn't help matters. You can Google it. Just Google the day Teesside went dark. There's still kind of news articles about it floating around the internet. Anyway, long story short, I was being babysat by my grandmother at the time, and this kind of thing freaked her out, which freaked me out, and the only way she could calm me down was to put, because the TV went off, I think I was watching, Camberwick Green or something like that. The TV went off, and the only form of entertainment, the only thing that she could find to amuse me was the old long-wave radio, and she put it on. It was probably Radio Luxembourg or something. And, on came Apache by the Shadows, and suddenly this was like a different kind of noise that I'd ever heard before. And, this was one of the big things that got me not only into music, but into the whole kind of sound of the electric guitar. So like all of these influences I'm going to talk about today, these are all from before I even, knew what an E string was, before I'd even owned my first guitar. And that was the first one there, hearing Apache by the Shadows when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, when I was really, really young. It's an experience that has stayed with me ever since. Next.
The Glenn Miller Orchestra.
Yes, now this one and the next one on the list are thanks to my parents' record collection. The Glenn Miller Orchestra, I remember I must have seen that movie with James Stewart, the Glenn Miller story, countless times. There was a time in past years, I should say, when it was on more often on TV, more often than the news, it seemed. Yeah, and I think it was my mother had the soundtrack album that would always be playing, and she had the old kind of shellac records, the 78s of all the old Glenn Miller hits, kind of Tuxedo Junction, Pennsylvania 65000, Little Brown Jug, In the Mood. Obviously, I even did a cover of that a while ago, which is still floating around YouTube somewhere. And yeah, it's just good time foot tapping music, and later on, much later on, when I was in my 20s, I was already playing guitar and everything by then. I actually went to a big band kind of concert, like one of the, it wasn't the Glenn Miller Orchestra because they continue to exist even without Glenn, but it was something like that, and stood in front of this band, and a band like that can give any rock band a lesson in volume, let me tell you. Yeah, so all of those early Glenn Miller things, again, it just for whatever reason piqued my interest when I was, kind of 4, 5, 6 years old. It was always the kind of music that was always on in our house, and I still love it to this day. And it's just one of the sounds that got me interested in the idea of music as something to to be an observer and a consumer of, and perhaps even one day, a participant in. So that's that one. Next.
Bill Haley and the Comets.
Again, as I said, my parents' record collection. We often think about, there was a time before rock and roll, and then almost like, kind of BC to AD. There's this big momentous kind of moment when, Glenn Miller is before rock and roll, and then everything changed. Truth is, it wasn't really like that. There were, in the same way as in the 70s, there were still plenty of hit records with a disco beat well after, punk had arrived on the scene. It's never kind of that sort of meeting. It's always a little bit more like that. And, this big band Glenn Miller stuff was still kind of popular with the kids who were listening to rock and roll, my parents included. And I remember having that old shellac 33 1/3 album of Bill Haley and the Comets, the Rock Around the Clock album, and listening to it again and again and again and again on the old kind of dance set record players. That was the source of music in our house when I was growing up. And then later on we got one of these newfangled music centres, as they were called, with 2 speakers. So yeah, the Bill Haley and the Comets thing, that was, really speaking, the thing that got me into 50s rock and roll, which was a big thing as I was growing up. In the 70s, it was like Happy Days was on TV, Grease was in the cinema, Shawaddy Waddy were in the charts, along with another band we're going to mention in a moment. So 50s rock and roll was a big thing in the 70s anyway, as I was growing up, and this was like sort of straight from the original source material back in the 50s. And remember loving that whole kind of scene. And that album, I think I was probably, again, preschool when I first heard it. I think I had measles or something like that, and it was an album that my parents were always playing just to kind of keep me amused, and I used to gurgle and kind of giggle and kind of clap my hands whenever it played. So it was obvious that I was enjoying it. And yeah, 50s rock and roll, that was my gateway drug to blues, which led me to jazz and rock and all manner of great things. So yes, Bill Haley in the Comets, we've got a lot to answer for. Next.
The Animals.
Yeah, now there is a clip kind of floating around the internet. I'll try and link to it. I'll link to all of these in the description box anyway, of the Animals playing, I don't know if they're actually playing or whether they're miming to House of the Rising Sun, but it's in black and white, or my memory of it's in black and white. I can't remember whether it actually is or not, or whether it's in my memory of it's in black and white because we had a black and white TV back then. But yeah, the Animals playing House of the Rising Sun. Just that jangly guitar intro, that was like, I just thought, that sounds so cool. That sounds incredible. I want to be able to do that. All of the artists and bands on this list today are responsible in some way, I guess, for making me want to learn to play the guitar when I was, I think, 11, when I first started in 1978. But this one more than any of the others, that was one of the kind of main ones that made me think, I want to be able to do that. Just that kind of iconic intro, played by the late, great Hilton Valentine. And it would be remiss of me not to share my little Hilton Valentine anecdote while I'm here. In his later years, in the 90s, he was playing in a fantastic blues rock band in the Northeast, on the Northeast club circuit called the Alligators. I remember seeing them at Middlesbrough Town Hall, just in the crypt, which is, for those of us from Middlesbrough, we know about the Town Hall crypt. Anyway, they're a great band, and I was in a kind of a pop rock covers band, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Bryan Adams, that sort of stuff. And we were doing this charity gig where there were a bunch of bands on the bill, along with the Alligators. I think they were headlining. And I knew who Hilton Valentine was. I knew that his intro to House of the Rising Sun was a big influence on me. So I went up and introduced myself. I've never been so starstruck in all my life. Went up and introduced myself and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Valentine, you're the reason I play guitar." and he said, "Don't effing blame me, son." and swiftly told me to go away. He gave me some advice on sex and travel, put it that way. So it made me never meet your heroes, I suppose, is the moral of that story. But yes, the Animals, especially House of the Rising Sun, but all those old kind of tunes, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, all that sort of stuff. Fantastic stuff. Let's see what's last on the list.
The Darts.
Indeed, The Darts, a band who have been almost kind of airbrushed out of the official nostalgia industry's kind of recollections of the 70s. I don't know how big they were overseas. I think they had quite a big following in Europe. I don't think they ever made any kind of impact in the States. But they were an amalgam of two bands that joined together. There was essentially a vocal doo-wop group that were the remnants of a band called Rocky Sharp and the Razors. Of course, Rocky Sharp later went on to have Rocky Sharp and the Replays with Ramalama Ding Dong and all those kind of songs like that. But his original band, Rocky Sharp and the Razors, featuring Griff Fender, Rita Ray and Den Hegarty, they joined forces with a fantastic singer who is sadly no longer with us, died in, I think, 2019, Bob Fish. Fantastic falsetto voice, as you will hear if you check out the link in the description. So you have this kind of four-piece doo-wop vocal band grafted onto the back end of the John Dummer Blues Band, which was like a blues band, which was the main kind of thing of drummer called John Dummer, a drummer called Dummer. Yeah, that's not one that's easy to say after a few pints. Anyway, they had a bunch of hits in the UK, all in that kind of 50s kind of doo-wop rock and roll revival, and they were so good at it. If you know any of their hits, you'll probably know their version of Duke of Earl. But, so many great songs like Boy from New York City, Come Back My Love, Daddy Cool, The Girl Can't Help It, which is the track I'm going to link to down below. Absolutely fantastic band, and just, they were all over the top 40, all over the hit parade, as we called it in those days, and I absolutely loved them. And it was just that whole kind of fed into that whole kind of 50s thing that was big in the 70s, and as I say, was kind of my gateway drug into blues. Their first album, actually, just called The Darts, had like a bit of a blues track on there, and last track on side 2 that had, I think it was Riot in Cell Block number 9, that they did a version of that on there. Fantastic stuff. So there you go. Those are the 5 bands and artists that got me interested in music. This is before I even ever picked up a guitar. These are the kind of bands and acts that sort of got me there, really. Let me know if you have any recollections of these particular bands that I've talked about today. Let me know what your influences are in that way. The things that made you maybe not want to pick up the guitar, but the things that made you take notice of music in the first place. I'm always interested to hear what your thoughts are on this kind of thing. But that is pretty much the video for today, folks. Hope you found it relatively entertaining, and if that's the case, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And why not drop me a like while you're at it. Don't forget the live stream every Friday, 5 p.m. UK time, where we drink beer and talk about music and guitar. Great way to kick off the weekend, and I'd love to see you there if you can make it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.